this is the part where we are going to talk with you about the reputation aspect of it. And I'm so glad, like, you guys are very diverse group of panel, and you tackle reputation from this different aspects. So I'm looking forward to learn from you and like the angles we are going to go. No pressure. So who we have here today? There's Auryn from Gnosis. Thank you for coming. Val from Ceramic, Auryn from Govrn, and Dennison from Telly. That's it, right? Like, we don't have any other person. Okay, that's it. We got this. And then I'm gonna kick off with a random question, and you can say pass. You can answer as you want. Are you famous on chain?
Definitely.
This feels like a trap.
No, there is no like spitfire, whatever. Don't overthink whatever comes to your mind. This is the warm up. We're gonna go to questions after.
I definitely know that I'm famous on chain because when I deploy smart contracts that have an ERC20 token involved in some way, people DM me on Twitter asking if they should buy it. I don't tell them anything. They don't know anything about me, but they're watching my address. And when I deploy smart contracts, they're already trying to use them and interacting.
Can we have your address?
Maybe that's the benchmark then. And so in that case, I'm absolutely not famous on chain.
We're gonna make you famous. Ape into anything Auryn launches.
Please don't. I put so much crap on chain.
Oh my god! Imagine you're instantly responsible for it too.
Right.
I've never been more interested in what Auryn has been shipping on chain now. Now I like need to go. It's like I'm gonna leave this panel and go check that out immediately.
I'm gonna just burn all of my public addresses. Go back to it.
Well, Auryn, are you famous on chain? We are going to go into questions after.
I don't think I'm specifically famous on chain, but I think anybody that has an address is famous on chain. Like, I think we're all famous on chain. Just by having that address, you make yourself famous. So that I think that's my answer. It's like, I don't think I'm more famous than anyone else here. In fact, I'm probably the least famous by that definition. But the fact that the ETH address exists at all, it's famous. It's public. It's ready to go.
Go. Okay, let's take more time now. So from your perspective, from your builder's perspective, or your like for your focus, what does reputation mean? Because this is like a very loaded word, and I wanted to pose this like just so that like the audience knows like what is the context we are talking about when you're talking about what does reputation mean to you in the context of on-chain.
I think you're spot on. It is a super loaded word, and it's one that gets thrown around in all kinds of places, well and very not well. I guess when I think about reputation, the big kind of caveat for me is that reputation is really contextual. The kind of further from the original context that some reputation has been kind of created, generated, the further from that you get, the less useful it is, in my opinion, in most cases. And so I think that's the big sticking point where, or the kind of nuance that a lot of people fail to recognize is that reputation is really contextual. It's very difficult to come up with kind of a universal reputation that's in any way useful.
Yeah, I would second that. I've historically been publicly kind of a reputation bear, and the main reason why I've been a reputation bear is that reputation, especially in our space when it's growing, is very much cohort based. A great example that I sort of always use when I talk about this is how in the sort of like NFT boom, where like something happened in some smart contract and someone mentioned Vitalik, and like some rather important NFT people were like, who the fuck is this Vitalik guy? And you know, it's really this idea that when you enter a community is very much where your reputation sort of perspective starting point comes from. You trust the people that enter your community ecosystem kind of at the same time in your cohort. But previous cohorts that maybe, for example, helped build the thing or the community that you've entered, they're kind of unknown folks to you. So to you, their reputation is a little bit irrelevant, right? It doesn't mean much to you. So I've always felt that like cohorts kind of block this sort of universal sense of being able to use reputation, because early Ethereum core developers, if they haven't been like keeping their Twitter followers growing and shit posting on a daily basis, maybe folks don't know them. But I think certainly the early Ethereum creating OGs would kind of feel like that is like the truest, most trustworthy core of in terms of reputation. So for me, I've always been a bear on reputation simply because of that sort of cohort.
I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree with Dennison pretty strongly here, actually, in not so little words. I think exactly what you said, Dennison, is why reputation is actually so important. You know what I mean? It's actually the other side. You see a problem with without like objective reputation, but that's exactly the point of why reputation is needed, why we need reputation. And I do agree with Auryn here. Reputation is incredibly context specific, right? But that doesn't mean that it has no value. In fact, the way that we see it at Govrn is that's actually one of the most delightful things about reputation, is that it is context specific. And from our point of view, how we maximize reputation is by taking all of our context specific reputations we have on each other and rolling that up into some aggregated reputation, right? That is really what our ideal should be, is how do we take everyone's subjective reputation and roll up into some macro reputation that we can all understand, right? Even like, this is like a sick group of people, by the way, like on this panel right now, like this is a dope group of people. All of us joined at different times. All of us do different things. All of us know each other in different contexts. We have our own relationships that have garnered our own reputation. But we still have this aggregated as a panel reputation score, if you will, that everyone in the audience is now creating, right? So exactly for what makes you bearish on reputation is exactly why reputation is so powerful and so important, and why we need to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I guess for me, well, okay, first, before I say anything, I'm so glad to see Auryn here. It's been so long.
What's up, Val? Like, actually, it just got out. Like, what's up, Val? This is great. It's so good to see you up here.
I know, it's awesome. So full circle. So anyway, reputation. I think my definition is a little bit more formalized than the ones I've gotten so far. But it definitely has like components of kind of everything that's been said so far. So like, the first thing is like, yeah, contextual for sure. It's modular, right? It's fragmented. It gets manifested in different ways by different people. I think that we get into trouble when we think of reputation as something objective, right? It's like, oh, like we are all here and we're going to like examine a single thing and then decide collectively what the reputation of that thing is. Or maybe it's just like, there's one person who has created the reputation for something and we trust that one person, which is like super objective. And it's saying that like, okay, a reputation is like this monolithic thing, right? That like you just look at and that's what it is. And I think it's much more like based on your individual perspective. So I actually like to think of it as like an abstraction of a relationship that you have with someone, right? Like if I attend a university, right, I have my own idea of the reputation of that university. The university has their own idea of like my reputation, and we represent that in like very different ways. So I'm going to represent it like I'm going to recommend people to go to this university. I'm going to say good or bad things about it. And the university is going to like package my reputation in a like report card and a diploma, right? And those are like completely different ways that you can like represent a single relationship. And they're from very different perspectives. So when I think about reputation, I think about the fact that we're like kind of like looking at this very like ambiguous kind of cloudy thing from all different sides. So it's collaborative, but it's also like individualized in a way that we have our own given perspective to it.
Love that. I heard that we have one more our panelist David.
Uh-oh.
Did you catch the question, or do you want to like chime in here?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone's gonna like my take.
Fair. Okay.
Which is why I'm staying silent. Yeah, I mean, I think there's two pieces. One is the less controversial, which is reputation 100% is contextual. But that actually means that your reputation in one area is not irrelevant to another. It's often very relevant with a very different correlation. And what I mean by that is if you join Incel DAO and you are a prime contributor to Incel DAO and Incel DAO loves you, there's a very, very good chance that jokeDAO probably will not, right? Like you're not going to be the most popular person there. And that's actually really useful. Like it's really useful to aggregate your positive reputation in Incel DAO in order to therefore have the negative correlation, right, in jokeDAO as well. So that's maybe the less controversial piece I'd say for why reputation matters. The more controversial one I'd say is it matters because of financial speculation. I think if we're thinking in terms of how you're getting ahead financially within Web3, the tokens you're getting, how you're able to use those to contribute. So far, customer acquisition costs in terms of using tokens has been quite bad in Web3 versus Web2. Thomas Tungas wrote a great piece on this recently. We're kind of indiscriminately throwing tokens to the wind in terms of people who've used stuff. And the only things that people have been able to do on chain has been very rote. So if you start being able to do much more creative contributions on chain and actually developing a contributor profile and reputation for your creative contributions and what you've done, that's actually giving you a lot of leverage to get, future airdrops and be brought into future projects, win future rewards from protocols as well. And I think like one interesting thing I think about in the context of like what we're doing at jokeDAO is like, let's say someone submits an option that totally fails, no one votes on it. And they're like, this is what our DAO needs to do. There's only like 5 people who support them and like everyone else ignores it. And then, 5 years from now, because this is all on chain, you go back and you look at it and you realize, actually, that one would have built us $10 billion worth of profit if we'd pursued that. Like that guy was a genius. And wait, consistently, they're proposing all these things that no one supported, no one liked. They didn't get positive reputation, but they were, winning this DAO billions of dollars. Well, then there's going to be massive incentive 5 years from now for you to be, brought into other projects, win their tokens, win their rewards as well. And so like building out reputation on chain, I think is actually really, really valuable. Right. Yeah, Auryn, great line. Reputation actually enables retroactive funding, right? Where even what you're doing now might not get you anything. You might not get respect. You might not be liked, but like it could win you a lot 5 years from now because of the public data set that's there. And I'm ignoring the other big piece, that thank God Evan isn't on this panel because she'd be coming after me right now. And rightly so, which is, off-chain verifiable credentials and how that plays into it too, which I think is also crucial. But like just talking about the on-chain piece, like there's so much leverage that you can have for future incentives based on developing a reputation as well. I cut myself off there.
Love it. You guys answered like so many of my questions. I love that. So maybe like one focus we can go is that. So it is very organic in that sense, like how we build reputation. So like it is given to us, or we earn it, or we self-attest it. Like I don't want to go into a philosophical place where, because these things we build, like either we work for it and we wanna show it, like credentials we earn, or it might be like given because and we don't have any control of. So where I'm trying to get to is like, without going like super philosophical on this, is that which area, like is there like a choice you're working for, or like this is the way to go, in the sense that it's given to us, or we self-attested, like verified credentials, self-attestation. I choose what I want to show versus yeah, so maybe we can like tackle a little bit about like what is it? Where is the choice of showing from the individual's perspective as well?
I mean, my answer to this one is pretty quick and unfortunate, but like it has to be everything all at once. Like I just don't think there's a way around that, because otherwise, like, I mean, I guess the idea is that like reputation has this like push and pull, and like it has this like feedback. And again, it's like it's this dynamic evolving thing, and it's modular, right? It changes over time. Like you have to have ways to kind of represent it from all of the perspectives. And so that means that it's not just about me self-attesting to a given thing, but it's also about like other people saying something about me. So David gave the great example of like, your participation in one DAO is actually like shown as a negative thing in another. You don't even have to be in that other DAO for that to happen. And it probably, in some cases, that's a really good thing, because then it can allow them to have some criteria and some assessment of like a stranger, right? So I think that like it has to be all of those things. And I think that's really critical, like even more so now, because like we're going like anonymous, just like off the charts now, right? It's like so many of our Web3 interactions, it's just like, people like on a panel or on like a Twitter space or like whatever, who don't know each other at all and are making very like quick judgments about the other person. And we've like maximized that a ton in the Web3 space. So yeah, I feel like you have to be able to represent reputation in like all the myriad ways that you can.
One thing that's worth kind of disambiguating here is kind of qualitative and quantitative reputations. And what I mean by that is like, so a credit score is a really great example of a very commonly used kind of form of reputation. You use this credit score to determine your creditworthiness to take on all kinds of different financial obligations or liabilities. And this is probably not a great reputation to use for a whole bunch of other contexts, but it is very portable because it's just a number. And so people do use it outside of its context, outside of its kind of where it probably should be used, because it is so portable and kind of so, I don't know, malleable, so easy to kind of take out of context and still apply it somewhere else. And I think a lot of the reputations that you guys are speaking about, Auryn, David, and Val, is of the kind of other type where it's probably a little bit more qualitative, where you're saying like, we can see that this person has done kind of X, Y, and Z thing over in this other DAO or on chain. They've kind of participated in this, they've earned that POAP, they've completed this quest, whatever it is. And so because they've done that, they kind of check a couple of boxes for us, and we think they're cool to be given some permission in our DAO or something like that. And I do think these things are quite different in the way that they can be applied and the kind of scales that you can apply them.
Yeah, I'd double down on what Auryn has just said, which is, yeah, I actually personally don't love the word reputation, because I actually think it's incredibly limiting in imagination and in scope. Really, reputation is just like value, which I know is like a whole nother like rabbit hole that we like shouldn't dive down. But like when people talk about calculating reputation scores at Govrn, we actually use a different term, which is setting up value frameworks, right? Essentially, what are the inputs to like that you as a community or a group of people, a subjective group of people, consider to be valuable inputs? And here is the score of which we're evaluating all these inputs at. That can be a qualitative evaluation, that can be quantitative evaluation, and that can be a badge saying you earned a certain, and then the output of that is the whole nother thing. That could be an output of a score. That could be an output of like a Boolean, like did you get something, did you not get something? And all of those, like not only is what you're grading someone on contextual and your evaluation function itself contextual, the output of that function itself is also contextual. And to Val's point, I 1000% think that like negative things is important when evaluating someone's total identity, if you will, right? And it's got to be it all, I think, within consent reason. But I like very much agree that we have to, when we say reputation, we have to increase our imagination of what we're thinking about. It's any type of value framework, right? It's any evaluation criteria that we just make public.
I would actually pose a question here as well that maybe like helps formulate a little bit better what we're talking about when we talk about reputation. Like, what is the purpose of reputation, right? Like, what are we using it for? Are we trying to build organizations where because they don't have any we're talking about sort of like binary reputations to mention in the chat, like if we're talking about some sort of like representation that we can be reductionist so that smart contracts can read, right? Are we trying to, is there some really difficult problem, which probably some sort of like, are you a good actor or a bad actor problem that we're trying to shortcut a solution to by using this vague concept of reputation on it. Like, I trust Auryn because we've had beers and tacos, so I don't have to like really solve this like globally difficult question of good and bad and apply it on Auryn because we've had tacos together, so we're good. Like I trust him. Maybe there's like, obviously that's like a crazy huge question and you can probably get a doctorate on that. But it might be helpful to understand like, where do we need reputation? And maybe that defines what reputation actually needs to mean, right? Like what we see a lot is when you give a framework for reputation, it gets gamed almost immediately. And you can imagine, especially now with tools like, chat, OpenAI's chat bots, you could imagine a future where like gaming reputation is actually really, really easy. Right? You're always constructive in the forums. You answer every question. I was thinking about, just building an app that, whenever someone asks a Solidity question, you just run it through chat AI and then it just answers it because it does a great job explaining high level Solidity smart contract concepts. Right. So how is this going to work? Maybe this is sort of just like branching. There isn't really a question here, but I'm sort of like thinking how the problem that we're solving is probably just as important as the reputation part in being used to solve it.
I think this just comes back to the original point I made, where reputation is really only useful in its context, or kind of the further away from that context you get, the less useful it becomes. And so the problem you are trying to solve kind of defines that context.
Well, yeah, and I think I don't know. I guess I have like a pretty specific example that I always point back to of like why I think reputation is needed. And it actually goes back to something Val said, which is like the pseudo-anonymous nature of what we're dealing with here, right? I believe in DAOs. Forget the word DAO for a second. I believe in online organizations because humans' superpower is to organize and coordinate. Like when we organize and coordinate, we can topple empires and we can do incredible things, right? I believe in the power of online organizing. Okay, what do you lose when you move to online organizations? What do you lose when you move to online coordination? Let's take it what physical proximity does to one another. I always like to use the example of a bike co-op. Why do bike co-ops work? Because when I'm working at the bike shop, when I'm working at the bike co-op, I am like fixing the gears on the bike, and I see David sweeping the floor, and I see Dennison manning the cash register, and I see Val working on the other bike, and I don't see Auryn in the shop at all, right? So I physically see everything that's around me because I have physical proximity. What does that create within the bike co-op itself? A sort of reputation. Because I say, okay, I know that they're doing work. I know that he's doing work. I know that she's doing work. I know that Auryn's not doing work, and I'm assigning reputation, right? We needed that physical proximity to build that reputation so that when I show up tomorrow, or when we as owners of the bike co-op say, hey, how do we want to distribute dividends? We can say, oh, we want to give it to Val, Dennison, and David and not Auryn because Auryn wasn't there, right? So reputation that's the benefit of having a physical location. What is the other thing online organizations do? They get rid of hierarchies. So what did managers used to do, right? In that same example, maybe Auryn is our manager, and maybe we all work in 4 different bike co-ops, right, around the world. And I don't see what Val, Dennison, or David does, but I talk to Auryn, our manager, and Auryn goes, Val was doing X, Dennison was doing Y, David was doing Z. And I hear about what they're doing, and I can build this reputation amongst each other. So that again, I know how to work with one another, right? You need that hierarchy and physical proximity. Now, the problem is when we move online, we don't have physical proximity, right? And we don't have managers, or we try to not have managers. And 3, we try to do it in a pseudo-anonymous way. That means there's no way we can play a repeat Prisoner's Dilemma game. It's all single-time games, which means we're always going to lose. The only way that we can get to an iterative Prisoner's Dilemma game, and the only way that we can continue to work together, is when we have this reputation aspect, right? Because we're able to understand the work that each other does, and we're able to harness our superpower, which is coordinating online.
I love that. Before, I just more the utility and maybe an approach where what are we missing and how to kind of build that to what existed aspect. Before I ask like a similar question, like to all, like, was there anything you wanted to share before I move on to the next question? Not to cut you off. Right. So I'm gonna keep on that utilitarian approach in the sense that like let's look at like the builders examples of like the things that we use the context, some examples, so we kind of like bring it to the ground of what we did. This was the use case. Like have they thought of it beforehand, or was it an afterthought that they have to build, for example? And I'm thinking like case studies, use cases that you have done with your work. Like, I'm really curious, like, do people think of, oh yeah, we should like put this in, or is it like generally something goes like, oh, it's not working and we have to bring another solution? How does it pan out with the with an example? Anyone wants to kick off first? Like just the examples that you have implemented from the wild web
I'm
tree.
happy to kick this off. I'm happy to kick this off, and I'd actually love to hear Val too because of all the work they're doing on ceramic. We have a DAO that's been using Govrn to track. So what Govrn does is not just create a reputation, but it creates a lot of the input data used to calculate a reputational score, right? And so what one of the DAOs that's been using us for over 6 months has done is they've been recording from their inception. They didn't worry about reputation or financialization to start. They just started recording their contributions that they were making. And they've been doing this for 6-7 months. Now, 6-7 months later, they're talking about distributing voting weights and financialization and creating reputational scores and giving people roles, all of this. But like, I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, much less what I did 6 months ago, right? And so what's beneficial about this reputation is you're able to create contextual, like what they use it for now is looking over all the work that was done over 6 months, assigning reputation, and then giving people roles. So it actually talks a lot about what David talks about curation, which is that leaders, they created an emergent system for how people become leaders in the DAO based off of what the contributions were. They created a formula to assign reputation, and the people with the highest reputation that became the leaders, right? It's like elections via curation rather than elections via elections. So there's like a ton of different use cases on that.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, so for people who don't know about ceramic, basically it's kind of this like peer-to-peer data protocol. And ceramic was invented for the identity use case. It was kind of like, how do we create infrastructure to actually support identities, using DIDs kind of as this like fundamental building block in a way that they can scale and also like meet the different kind of verticals that you would want to spawn off from that. So that's kind of how like ceramic got incepted, I guess, or the first idea for it. And today it's a little bit wider, so like covering a wide range of use cases, but one of the biggest ones still is identity and reputation. So Gitcoin Passport is a good example. Under the hood, they're using ceramic, and basically they're trying to like be able to prevent spam, right? Prevent like bots from just coming in and kind of gaming their quadratic funding system. So with Gitcoin Passport, you kind of can create this account, all using Web3 protocols. So signing in with Ethereum, for example, and adding different sort of like social accounts to an identity that the user controls. And from there, Gitcoin is able to, kind of develop an algorithm effectively to determine if someone is a real person or not. And that's kind of the approach that they're going down and trying to take. And yeah, I mean, I think that's going to continue to be a common one. Gitcoin is doing this, other teams are doing it in different ways. But the kind of powerful paradigm from our perspective, at least, is like all of this is built on kind of shared data schemas, which means that the reputation, the identity, the interactions, they become composable and modular so that you can bring them to other apps, right? So everyone who's creating data through Gitcoin's website is actually just like filling that data into the ceramic ecosystem, which is a public open ecosystem. And then any other application can kind of pull in that and utilize it in the way that they want to. So that's like one example of people using identity on ceramic. Another is kind of like what Auryn was talking about, basically determining like someone's contributions, right? And we have this kind of like impact evaluation grant that we have open, which is giving people the ability to, you know, come up with ways to determine what the impact someone is, and then like figure out, you know, how you should be distributing funds, right, based on the impact that someone gave into that system. So yeah, like at the end of the day, I feel like we're definitely super early. Like there's still like so many ways that you can kind of iterate upon this. But to me, the kind of essential piece is like really keeping that composability, because especially because it's so early, but just in general, like you don't want to kind of lock yourself into a single position and not be able to get out, right? Like you want this to be flexible, you want it to be dynamic and change over time. And so if you have some sort of composability, whether that's using something like ceramic or something else, like we need to be using shared protocols in order to do this stuff at the kind of like foundational layer. And then from there, you know, we just, yeah, build like whatever we want, and then kind of all the creative juices can get flowing.
So Val, you mentioned one thing there about kind of difficulty in deciding how much reputation someone should get. And so I think this is another piece that's really worth kind of diving into and kind of disambiguating a little bit. The I guess difference between kind of reputation that your reputation might be a score or kind of exists somewhere on a spectrum, versus reputation where it's essentially a gate. You know, you either have this reputation or you don't. You have this credential or you don't. And I think a lot of the use cases that you're describing there are that second type, right? Where it's like you know the system either judges that you're a Sybil or you're not. You're a unique human or you're not a unique human, or you have participated in this thing or you haven't. Which is really, really useful for enabling a whole bunch of types of systems, things like democratic voting or quadratic voting, quadratic funding, rely on this kind of really strong anti-Sybil qualities. But then the other kind of reputation there, where we're talking about kind of scores or spectrums, I think are really important for enabling all kinds of other systems. I mean, similarly, if you're talking about voting systems, it's useful, obviously, for enabling votes or vote weight, where your ability to kind of impact the outcome is directly proportional to the reputation that you've earned, the kind of reputation score that you have. I guess kind of tying back to the original question, some kind of practical experience with that in using Colony over the last couple of years has been that's one of the hardest things that we've found with trying to use Colony is essentially like you have this reputation weighted governance. Anyone can kind of create a motion to make the colony do something, and then the outcome is decided by a reputation weighted vote. But deciding how to allocate reputation for different types of tasks is a really, really hard thing, especially like a hard thing to kind of bootstrap. It requires a ton of kind of norm setting. And I guess I've seen a couple of different approaches to it, but it's at least in my experience tended to just revert back to something where the tokens were in some way equating to kind of dollar value, or some way of kind of valuing people's time when they were contributing to the organization, and that becoming the kind of de facto way to allocate these kind of reputation points that later become kind of part of your vote weight and part of your potentially kind of economic stake in this organization. But yeah, anyway, just wanted to kind of disambiguate that and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I think I might be off here, but it feels like there's often an assumption that like reputation means not only monolithic reputation that's true across the board, but that the platform that wins for reputation will be the one that like, you know, really lets you judge people, let's say, you know, based on such and such criteria. And I think like it's going to be much more likely that, I mean, there's two pieces to this. One is on-chain reputation is kind of a joke right now because people aren't really doing anything on-chain, right? Like this is like going to be massive, but it's thanks to stuff like Ceramic, right, that will be able to enable a whole new collection of data, and also just new use cases beyond DeFi speculation, that we actually will be able to get much richer data points that where reputation actually can matter. Even if we want reputation to matter now, we just don't have good data to go off of on chain for it, right? But even once it does, I think it's like, you know, the winning solution has to be something like Dune dashboards, where it's like every community will need to be able to design their own metrics to analyze all that data that's out there in terms of what they personally prioritize for their community as reputation. And then other ones can fork it and say, you know what, we like your reputation system somewhat, but we didn't like this piece of it. Let's create our own instead. And it's like, that for me is really going to be the winning play. I think it'll be built on stuff like Ceramic as well as just basic on-chain data. Something we think a lot about with what we're building is just like, we need to incentivize creation of new data. And it's like, you know, with contests alone, you can get like a ton of data on like how often people submit options, how often they vote, how often they vote on winning options, how often they submit winning options, how often they build consensus, what their passion is. Do they put 100% of the votes towards something versus, you know, 50%? How soon do they vote? Who do they tend to align with on voting? And so like from one on-chain transaction, right, you can get all of this massive data on user preferences, et cetera. That is open and allows everyone to design their own kind of Twitter algorithm, you know, in terms of like what they want to prioritize. But like, we can't get there, first of all, until we have a lot more data points. Second, to go to a question I think someone asked before, putting a lot of off-chain data on-chain as well. And then third, really enabling communities to be able to design their own systems for what matters to them that likely will not be what matters to other communities as well.
Yeah, I really want to hit on something David said, which I was going to add on to. Well, first off, just to David's point, we're very excited at Govrn to be putting a lot more of these data points for reputation on chain. So if you have data points to put on chain, come talk to me. But to what David just said, I think is a key piece of reputation, which is I think we're too often focusing on how reputation is used, right? But that's like not why Web3 reputation is so crazy. No one would say that reputation is not No one would say that reputation isn't helpful in our modern day world. We use reputation not just socially, but for everything. There's like a CVS across the street that uses a reputational score on me, right? Why I think Web3 reputation is so powerful is what David just said, is because anybody can now stand up reputation scores. Anybody can now create these systems for reputation. And when we create the ability for permissionless reputation to be created, that enables this incredibly rich and robust world. It's not about creating the ultimate reputation. It's about allowing anybody to create reputation. Credit scores are bad because they're exclusionary, right? Because there's 3 and no one can create new credit scores. If we had a permissionless way to create credit scores, then we could create more inclusionary banking systems, right? The same way to when we talk about membership to organizations, when we have permissionless way to create new reputation scores, it's not so much exclusionary membership we're creating, but much more inclusionary because we can find reputational scores that we can trust. Like the secret power here is the infinite amount of reputation scores we can create. That's why Web3 reputation is so powerful, in my opinion.
I love that. I love like just how such a diverse and like a broad place you guys navigated and like come up with the different angles, looking at different aspects of the reputation and why on chain and like the forkability is the most important. So thank you so much. I have questions more, and there are so much more questions in the chat, but I don't think we're going to have time to dive on them. But like 2023 is like, I think we are like just starting. You guys have been in it, but it seems that the trend is like there will be more and more people in it, so we will have time to discuss. I believe we don't have to slow right now, and we will have time to discuss and develop on these ideas. I want to thank you so much for sparing your time and coming and being here, and yeah, like see you in the next one.